Niels, while I was looking at your videos and trying to find I couldn't avoid seeing how the force behind them was a sort of desire. And it's not just because these people are very desirable. It's a sort of fascination that fills the distance between the eye of the camera and the subject, but also it describes an interaction which sometimes is direct, as the first guy, sometimes is more sheltered, like in this case. But the end product is always a sort of purified, almost metaphysical and cool desire. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that all these works are not about desire, but they are using that connotation as a means to produce something, and to produce something that is saying something about something else. So in the first one, which was done in 2000, it was done actually not so consciously. It was just like footage that I was taking from this guy because I was fascinated by this guy cleaning the windows while I was talking with this friend of mine about her daughter's private school and what kind of choices she could have. And this guy was cleaning the windows outside the airport bar in Prague. That is obviously a really dense situation where you have this sense of exclusion, but at the same time you don't know who's actually the one excluded, because I'm actually I'm interested in this guy washing the windows, and I have no access to that guy, and that guy cannot do anything else but clean the windows and continue doing what he's doing, because that is his job. So I was always interested in this kind of mirroring society, but not in a way of judging and saying, okay, there's the outside and there's the inside, and who's actually the one exploiting, but it's actually it's a more complex relationship, and that's what happens here too, where I'm just this is an excerpt of a long time of a long series of tapes that I took from my window, and that's all that. Of a park where people were doing different activities, and this guy is just doing this kind of amateur circus exercises. But it was just about getting people that were that summer, it was a particularly hot summer, that were taking their clothes off and doing something. So
exactly, and the title of this work is The Heat. You may want to show also another clip from the same series simultaneously so that we can have an idea of how you actually proceeded as a viewer, but started interacting more with a wider series of things. Like over 3 months, you kept shooting things, and then you gave us a few snippets. If you have it, I think that would be awesome for us to see.
Yeah, there are the snippets that are actually more interesting, that are more coming to the point, because more than developing a concept, I was more waiting for something to happen. So this is...
I think there are other ones that are very...
I was just making this one bigger. This is actually a really short one. But this is also showing different... it's different parts of society from that time, because the guy doing exercises, like the gymnast, is actually a guy doing something in his leisure time, which... on the other hand, this guy who's actually having a leisure moment in his job because he's a construction worker, which seems almost unreal because he looks like straight out of a porn movie. He's waiting for something. I don't know what he's waiting for. I will never know, but it's just like what I was interested in is also that I was filming these guys and I was just interested in filming them, but the camera was, I would say, was going kind of more or less focusing on these guys, but also trying to check out what the situation was. So it was really, what I was interested in is the instinctual moment of capturing something on tape.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you want to capture something without being captured. You're removing the risk of being seen. That was very on the front before in the first one that we saw. The guy actually saw you, so you were still there for an interaction. But now it's almost voyeuristic. You are receding, and I think that's very significant because your itinerary as an artist, you keep receding further and further back. In a way, these are rare shots for your creations now because we don't see anything that you shoot anymore in your current work, right? I mean, after these pieces, you started using what you call found footage. So this is sort of a vintage Niels because you don't do your own material anymore, right?
It's also in a way it's found footage too. It's found people in a way, and they're all performers. I mean, against their own will. It's obviously really like I'm taking power over these people and I'm displaying them and I'm doing whatever I want with them. I'm showing them here tonight. They don't know that they're being shown.
They might be in the audience.
They might, yeah. But I would recognize them probably. It's really about using that kind of what we can call desire, like looking at these guys stripping as not what they are, but more as like having a means to have the camera do something that is really unconscious. So using my own drive and taking
advantage of them. Always.
Yeah, but to say something else, which is actually like going away from authorship, which is really important.
And I think we can really see that at work in the next video, which is, I think, a sort of a unique piece in your production, because in the one we're going to see next, which is Poem of Summer, if I don't go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Poem of Summer is the next step. We have both, in the same word, your own shooting and what you call found footage. So this was initially, as I understand it, an installation which was projected on the different sides of the screen. So you can never see both scenes at once, as we are going to see them in a minute. But you would see on the one side of the screen this images from a summer that you witnessed. So there are these people over there. That's your own footage. And on the other side of the same screen, you had to actually walk around it. You would see these other people. And this is taken from a porn movie, a gay porn movie, but actually together it's a critique of porn strategies, of gay porn strategies, because usually you find this sex scenes interspersed with some straight scenes so that sexual arousal can be heightened. But you didn't want to do that, so you edited all the sex scenes.
The way I was looking at the scene on the left, which is actually, it was just out of a house that I was staying at, so it was totally incidental. I was looking for something that would parallel that in the virtual world to show that actually the two are pretty the same. Like what you see in the real world and what you see in films is actually the same because you already have a filmic view of reality.
Exactly. I think you show very nicely how we are all socialized into this sort of aesthetics. Even the construction workers before, you said it's like a porn star almost, right? So
yeah.
who is the model, who is authentic? There's a contamination at work. But I would see that technically this is also the beginning of what I would call your montage term. And I would call it montage, not technically, because as I said, it's not the same tape. But just to quote Eisenstein like that, it's a juxtaposition of independent thought that are not one after the other, but one on top of the other. So in a way, you are physically materializing that connection of opposite or different, independent thoughts in your work. And then you do it in more and more complex ways. You add sound later with what we're going to see, and you manipulate your authorial voice with these technicalities. Isn't that what you do next?
Yeah, I mean, what interested me in you when we were talking the other day about Eisenstein, I went to see examples from Eisenstein's movies, and when you want to show what happens in a movie without showing the movie, you show stills, and you show stills next to each other. So actually we could see this as like a series of stills next to each other, like A, B, like example A and example B, like reality and fiction. And if you look at how Eisenstein is analyzed, also like Ziga Vertov, which is maybe also like another, it connects to this, because Eisenstein is really ideological, the way he cuts, and Vertov is more, he has these categories of like, if you show a man looking a certain way at something you don't see, and at the same time you show footage of a little girl, or you show a naked woman, or you show a scene of war, that guy that you see is going to have, in your perception, although it's the same film material, is going to have different connotations. Like the guy is going to look like a pedophile, the guy is going to look like someone sexually aroused, or someone that is really like hit by that scene of war.
Yeah.
So what happens here is really that you have these images cross in your mind. I mean, and my footage is more like innocent in a way, because it's really like, it's just like standard camera.
For example, what we are seeing here at Gaspar, it's taken from Conte d'été, from Romer, and you edited your own way. As you said, we see the same movies, but each one of us sees a different movie in a way. And you wanted to produce that experience, I would guess, because you were actually, as we want to bring back desire from the beginning, following your initial desire to see this man, and then editing out of the movie only the scenes where this man is alone with the landscape, alone with his story, alone with his ideas. So we have another movie, that's Gaspar, and not a Conte d'été anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's a Romer movie, and it's, I mean, obviously, what is important to me is also the moment where I see it first, because that's the moment where I have my instinctual reaction to it. And my instinctual reaction that night when I saw Conte d'été for the first time was that it was a really boring movie, and I had nothing else to watch because it was on TV, it was on Arte, and it was really late, and I just saw him, and I saw that it was a movie about summer and being at the sea, and so I was thinking, okay, this guy's going to strip at some point, let's see how he looks, and he's stripping. And that was the whole thrill. It was a really cheap thrill, obviously. And in the movie Conte d'été, this guy has 3 girlfriends that he can't decide. He can't decide for any of them.
So you said, let's take them away.
Let's take all the 3 girlfriends out.
That's video of the problem.
But obviously there's no statement in terms of like, you know, all these pieces are not about gender, they're not about being gay, they're not about queer, they're just about using that energy to create something that is really conceptually to the point.
Yeah.
So what I'm always interested in is also that my pieces have this tendency in suggesting certain readings that they don't really have. So obviously these pieces have this sexual charge, but then if you look at them, they really aren't at all sexy. I mean, they're really dry, actually.
Well, this one I would say is claustrophobic. This frame especially, you know, there at the corner of the car. And then another feeling that I get from this is a sort of feeling of autism, like he doesn't have anyone to interact with, so he's interacting with himself only, and projections of his life that is nobody there.
Yeah.
So I think these are themes that come up, even if maybe they weren't in your intentions. And I would say that we could also open the floor for interventions from
Yeah,
the
sure.
audience, because this is the last work we are showing, and when it's over, it's over. So now you have your opportunity to say something.
Actually, I mean, I have one last one, but it's meant to be like the end of it all.
Yeah, for the blue line.
So I'm just gonna introduce it briefly when we're finished, and then I'm gonna let it go. And if you want to enjoy it, you enjoy it, because it has this hypnotic quality. I think that is more like it goes away from this dryness. Yeah.
I found it interesting to me, like your films were all like about the weight of the body. I think, I know. I think it was like kind of, I mean, I felt it was like about the weight of the body. We talked about this voyeurism or something. I think the reason, or at least for me, was why I felt voyeuristic was that when I looked at these people, I really felt that, that I saw like the weight of their body and their weaknesses, like that the body is like something that is weak. Whereas if you like look I mean, if we go look to modern society, then it's like the body is not meant to be important, you know. In everyday like interaction, the body doesn't play a role. You talk, you are like a persona or something. You are not the body. That's how our society works. That is how democracy works, etc. That is our moral order works in some way. And I think the voyeurism or the shame we feel when we look to these bodies and to their weaknesses and to their I mean, in these films that you showed first, you saw like that these people were like just alone with their body, and something was happening, and it didn't felt right to me. It felt like it shouldn't be like that. But I think that these are like rare moments that you have this like in
I mean, it's interesting that you see it shouldn't be like that, because exactly that's what it's partially about. I mean, there's obviously this kind of invasion of privacy. I mean, there's very strict rules about photography or video, that if you take a video or a photograph of people that are more than 5, then it's a group. But if it's less than that, then it's individuals. And so I was really interested also in having them isolated and be really clear about, I am invading their privacy. They don't know that I'm filming them, apart from the first one. But in the first one we have the situation that the guy knows that I'm filming him, but he can't do anything about it. So that's one point. But the other point is also that when you cross that barrier, when you let yourself into it and you accept that situation, then that's just the beginning. That's just where the game starts and where it goes into other possible readings. So that's what I'm always interested in.
We have another question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak more about, you said it's not about gender. And I mean, the obvious fact is that all of the characters in your film are male. And then the one thing I like you said about, because it does, I mean, it seems to be somewhat, I don't know, kind of a dichotomy in the sense that on the one hand, I read it very much about the body and about voyeurism and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they're all male figures, and you obviously can't escape that. And so when you said it wasn't, there's nothing to do about gender, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that.
Well, on the one hand, there's a total admission from my point that it's obviously about attraction. So it's obviously about me being attracted to those bodies that happen to be male bodies. That's the starting point. I also know that if I was if I was like taping naked women, it would be a totally different thing. And that's also the game, like what really changes, like what is really the difference? Like, are we really sure that if we exploit the male body, that's okay, and if we exploit the female body, it's okay? I mean, that's another element that actually it's good that you addressed it, because it's another point in my work, like what are these issues actually about, and are we really allowed to do that just because, you know, it's also a thing of like, there's this thing of like, if you're gay, you're allowed to do certain things, or gay is also a thing that I don't really accept for myself, because it's also like a brand and it's like some kind of like thing to sell products with. But if you're into guys and you're a guy, then you're allowed to exploit these bodies. But if you're a guy and you're into women, then it's different. I understand why it's different, but I also think that we should question that too. Like, we should always question everything. So we should never take anything for granted, and we should never look at pictures and say like, okay, I see this is that and this is okay, but this is not okay for a series of reasons. I think
I would agree with that, because I think in the beginning, because the female body is always objectified in mainstream like society, you're used to that, so you almost in a sense like you take that very much for granted. But I think what's interesting in your pieces is in the beginning you actually, the male figure seems somewhat neutralized in the beginning, because you don't anticipate, there's not an expectation that this male body is being objectified until the fact that you train your camera on that subject for such a duration, that then it becomes this crossing, this like this transgressive border gets crossed, and then you realize, oh, you're becoming a voyeur, and that same body is becoming objectified regardless of gender.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just make a really nice aspect.
Yeah.
I don't know, do we have anybody else that wants to jump in, or? I don't think so. So you want to say a word about the last video, but let it go?
Yeah, as far as still going, I didn't know he was still doing his thing.
Yeah, I did that.
But I'm going to stop him.
Yes.
And let's go over to something completely different, but not so different, because this was supposed to be about performance, and I say it explicitly, I'm not performing tonight. But I'm showing videos and works that are really like my early works, actually, from 2000 to 2005, that are more about, that could be associated with performativity in a way that is away from conscious performativity. And here we have, like the last video I'm showing, and I'm letting it go because it's really long, and you can watch it as long as you want. You can leave after 1 minute or watch 27 of it. It's actually an infinite piece, but this is a simulation of this piece. It's called Poetic License. It's footage taken from a movie by John Singleton called Poetic Justice, with starring Janet Jackson and also Tupac Shakur. It's a movie from the mid-90s. It's a really bad movie. I don't necessarily recommend you to watch it, but it was really interesting because Janet Jackson is playing a young woman that is occasionally writing poetry, and the poetry she writes is actually by Maya Angelou, who's a famous Afro-American poet. She was also she was really close to Malcolm X, and she's been reading a poem when Bill Clinton became a president, and there was the official ceremony. So she's really famous, and so John Singleton chose to take Janet Jackson for this movie and have her read poetry by Maya Angelou, and have Tupac Shakur in this movie. And when you watch this movie, you see that these people, they can't get out of the role, but they're just Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur, and the poetry is just Maya Angelou. So it doesn't really work. But what is interesting is that this movie is actually a long advertisement for Janet Jackson. It just makes her look great. It makes her look strong, it makes her look courageous, it makes her look in some way political. Yeah, that's really important. And then I went into Janet Jackson's whole discography from the album Control from 1984. She's been using a strategy that I find really interesting because Janet Jackson's albums, I mean, we can like them or not, but they are pop albums, they're really basic pop albums. But what she does is that she uses interludes and intros a lot. In every album since Control, which was her first more conscious album as an artist, she's been using interludes between the songs to convey messages that were in some way political. But what political means in that context is actually that the political is a way to sell a product. Like if you convey a political message, you're in some way safe. So for me that was really interesting because I see a parallel to what happens in art, is that if you make a piece, whatever it is, and you say, this piece is about this and that, this piece is about, I don't know, it's about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's about Occupy Wall Street, it's against the art market, it's a Marxist piece, then in some way you're safe. If you as an artist would say, this is a piece about my conviction that fascism is the ultimate form of government, you would be in trouble. I think that that's really dangerous because it creates some kind of mainstream where you're safe when you push certain buttons. And I think that that's the same thing that happens actually in this market products. And I mean, I'm not judging Janet Jackson. I think she's actually a great artist, and I think she's a really clever artist. But we should be really careful when we produce art to know exactly what we're doing and to not feel too safe in what we're doing, I think, and to really think in terms of like what is really political, like what does it mean to be political. And I don't think it means to take certain assumptions that are already clear and already stated, but I think that it should be always questioning things in whatever we do. So this is actually, I don't know, I'm just going to let it go and you can just judge by yourself. I mean, what I think is important when you make art, another thing I think is really important is that you leave the interpretation as open as possible and you just give give the opportunity to make up your own mind.
Yeah, I think we should let it go and let us enjoy the rest of the evening. And if there are any more last questions, which I don't think so,